This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
We are angry, we're hurt, we're feeling betrayed by a friend.
Premier Tim Houston fires back at U.S. President Donald Trump and his tariffs on Canadian goods.
Province House protest. Hundreds rally against what they call an attack on democracy by the Houston government.
And Power Project. New details on major electricity upgrades between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick.
Showers, drizzle, and fog patches. As we move into Thursday, that will become heavier rain from west to east. Your full forecast is coming up.
It is the second day of Canada's trade war with the United States, a day that saw Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on calls with U.S. President Donald Trump throughout the afternoon.
The White House confirms big three automakers Ford, GM, and Stellantis will get a 1-month exemption on tariffs. And here in Nova Scotia, the Premier said he's looking at a number of ways the province could step up in such a challenging time. The CBC's Michael Gorman reports.
A day after the U.S. imposed tariffs on Canada, Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston discussed ways his government could help.
What those supports will look like will be determined over the coming days in conjunction with the federal government. But just so you have a sense of where our heads are, we're looking at options like EI top-ups, like buying goods from canceled projects and retraining options for workers.
The province has announced a $200 million contingency fund, and Houston says that can be topped up if necessary. Houston announced countermeasures yesterday, including pulling American booze from NSLC shelves. The government will block U.S. companies from bidding on tenders and double the tolls American commercial trucks must pay at the Cobequid Pass. Meanwhile, the Premier continues to push other provinces to knock down interprovincial trade barriers. Houston says not all provinces have bought in as fast as he'd like, but he's optimistic that will change.
Having Ontario on board, I can't understate the importance of that. It is incredibly important that the largest province in our country said we're in. Count us in was their word.
Opposition leaders were pleased to get more details today, but they are looking for a more coordinated approach.
We know there's a contingency fund, we know there are possibilities, but how are those decisions going to get made? We need to make sure that the voices that need to be at the table are at the table. We need to hear from industry, from all of the leaders of sectors, from workers, and from Nova Scotians to see what our path forward is.
A Liberal bill would set guidelines for how the contingency fund would be used.
I believe that the government should be designing a blueprint on how that money should be distributed. So we want to bring people together, have the conversation around that money, and set some parameters around it to determine how we're going to support businesses, how we're going to support individuals, and ultimately be accountable for taxpayers' dollars.
Houston says the province is waiting to see federal support measures and will look to augment those and fill gaps as necessary. Michael Gorman, CBC News, Halifax.
While the Premier was tackling tariffs, hundreds gathered outside Province House today to protest his government. Many of the protesters were members of what have been referred to in the past as special interest groups. They say they were there to draw attention to what organizers are calling the PC's recent attacks on the democratic process. Danielle Edwards has more.
In front of Province House, Hollis Street was blocked by a massive group holding signs about fracking, water conservation, and workers' rights. The demonstration was organized by several advocacy groups who say the PC government is using its supermajority to dismantle accountability processes. One of the groups that was represented was the Public Service Alliance of Canada. Alliance member Helen Zabidi says the government has not been communicating with Nova Scotians.
Our provincial government has taken advantage of its majority and is implementing draconian measures that it didn't campaign on that are going to affect the future for all Nova Scotians. We're in a climate crisis and they want to implement fracking.
Others in attendance were opposed to specific bills that have been recently put forward, including Bill 12, which would link university funding decisions to government priorities. This professor says the proposed bill could change the face of university research.
So the idea that politicians can crystal ball what society needs is just false. The big example of Canadian university research is the invention of insulin by a professor at the University of Toronto. So if someone went to a politician with a research proposal like, oh, I want to look at the pancreases of dogs, is a politician going to say yes? But that, of course, led to insulin.
NDP leader Claudia Chender also spoke at the rally and had a message of unity for attendees.
We all talked about the economy. We all talked about healthcare. We all talked about the cost of living. And yet, the legislative agenda for this session has been an assault on democracy.
Premier Tim Houston did not attend the rally, but told reporters there is room for everyone in the discussion amid the trade war with the U.S.
This is kind of a wartime atmosphere. The President of the United States has declared economic war on our country. He's intent on hurting our country. He's intent on hurting our people. And we need to unite and respond.
Danielle Edwards, CBC News, Province House.
Our first quick look at the weather. Here's Ryan.
And some rain on the way.
Yeah, a lot of rain, especially for New Brunswick. That's where the bullseye will be with this system, no doubt about that. But Nova Scotia is going to see pretty good shot of rain as well. Widespread amounts, 10 to 30 millimeters. And on the edge of that bullseye will be Digby down towards Yarmouth County. That's our best chance of seeing 30, 40, maybe 50 millimeters of rain. And could see some pockets that do exceed 30 millimeters in through the central areas of the province and up towards Cape Breton as well. So certainly a healthy shot of rain. That's Wednesday evening through to Friday evening. So 48 hours. And we are going to be looking at some showers Wednesday night in through the start of Thursday, and then those heavier periods of rain will begin from west to east through Thursday late morning and the afternoon, and some gusty winds coming with this as well. For Friday, rain will taper to showers and then back to some flurries as temperatures drop into Friday night and Saturday morning. More on this with your full forecast in just a few.
Thanks for that, Ryan. Talk soon. Well, Nova Scotia and New Brunswick have been planning for years to upgrade power lines that connect their electricity grids. It's a major infrastructure project that will cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and how the project will be paid for is now becoming more clear. Taryn Grant explains.
New power lines between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick will be an expensive endeavor.
I think in the past, the public number we've used was approximately $800 million. I'm confident it will come in less than that.
Officials gathered in a packed room in Dartmouth to announce some of the financing plans for the project. The Canada Infrastructure Bank will put up $217 million.
We'll be alongside Nova Scotia Power as an equal owner in the project.
And a group of Mi'kmaq communities will also buy a stake.
For too long, Indigenous communities have been left out on the sidelines of major infrastructure projects. That is changing.
Nova Scotia and New Brunswick are both trying to add more clean energy to their grids, but the intermittency of wind and solar calls for backups. Upgrading the power lines is supposed to ensure stability and reliability as renewable use increases. The plan is to double the capacity for the provinces to share electrons. This project has been years in the making, but some people are highlighting how it's now taking on new meaning in light of the Canada-US trade war.
This is the right answer. The best method for us to retaliate or defend ourselves is to take care of each other.
Construction is expected to start later this year and be completed by 2028. Taryn Grant, CBC News, Halifax.
The Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs is calling out Premier Tim Houston as his government pushes a new emphasis on natural resource development. The Chiefs sent a letter to the Premier on Tuesday criticizing the lack of consultation ahead of the tabling of Bill 6. Among other things, the omnibus legislation will create the potential for fracking for onshore natural gas and repeal a ban on uranium exploration and mining. The Chiefs say it is unacceptable for legislation to be fast-tracked without consultation and consideration for their treaty rights. Natural Resources Minister Tory Rushton says there was urgency to table the bill given the threat of U.S. tariffs, but he says the Mi'kmaq will be consulted on the legislation and all potential resource development projects.
Halifax's police board chair is leaving the committee after just a few weeks in the role. Gavin Giles, a local lawyer, was elected as chair in January. Giles joined the board in 2022. He asked the municipality to extend his 3-year term, which is ending this month, but that did not happen. Some citizens have said Giles was rude and dismissive during public consultation on the Halifax Police and RCMP budgets. Last year, he called some presentations, quote, nonsense and rubbish commentary designed only to titillate and annoy.
Gavin Giles' behavior as chair was even more appalling than the previous year, racking up at least 4 formal complaints for his reactive bias and extremely prejudiced behaviors.
Giles says the police board investigated at least 2 complaints about him, which were dismissed. He says he took issue with speakers making sweeping comments that police always make situations worse.
Those comments, as far as I'm concerned, lack balance and they lack objectivity, and they don't in any way inform the budget message, which is what is trying to be delivered.
The board will elect a new chair at their next meeting in early April.
The demolition of a colorful row of buildings in downtown Halifax has started. The structures had been standing since the 1800s. In 2020, a parcel of land just under 11,000 square feet between Birmingham and Queen Streets was sold. It's now owned by a numbered company controlled by John Goshen. It's unclear what will be built on the site. Goshen did not respond to a request for comment. The buildings housed a number of local businesses over the years, including Woozle's Children's Bookstore and Elsie's Consignment Clothing. The owner of Elsie's told CBC it was emotional seeing the buildings come down.
I'll take you back to the Canada-U.S. relations now. Just hours after the U.S. imposed 25% tariffs on virtually all Canadian and Mexican goods, U.S. President Donald Trump issued a temporary reprieve for the auto industry, a decision that came after the heads of GM, Ford, and Stellantis raised concerns with the president about the tariffs.
We spoke with the big 3 auto dealers. We are going to give a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through USMCA. Reciprocal tariffs will still go into effect on April 2nd, but at the request of the companies associated with USMCA, the president is giving them an exemption for 1 month so they are not at an economic disadvantage.
Levitt said the 1-month exemption is meant to give the big 3 automakers time to shift investment and production to the U.S. Some auto executives say they're being punished for complying with Trump's signature free trade deal from his first term in office. The USMCA, or CUSMA, as it's known in Canada, almost every American vehicle is made from components that go back and forth across the U.S., Canadian, or Mexican borders repeatedly, as agreed to in that deal.
And even with the 1-month extension of the tariff deadline for the big 3 automakers, it still leaves a sweeping number of punishing levies in place on Canadian goods.
As Kate McKenna reports, provincial and industry leaders are speaking out.
Ontario's premier says the auto part carve-out doesn't change things. Canada's not backing down.
We're going to stand solid that 0 tariffs or nothing.
This is one of those small victories that we should take, but we should continue with the resolve.
On day 2 of the trade war, the Prime Minister spoke with President Donald Trump. Trump took to social media soon after, accusing the Prime Minister in his last week of office of clinging to power, saying the call ended in a somewhat friendly manner. He wasn't able to tell me when the Canadian election is taking place, which made me curious, like what's going on here. I then realized he is trying to use this issue to stay in power. Good luck, Justin.
This is a war by other means. A war of disinformation and ridicule, questioning our right to exist, our sovereignty, our borders.
Trump says this is about fentanyl. Canadian officials aren't so sure, especially amid Trump's repeated threats to make Canada the 51st state.
Even if the tariffs are withdrawn, we will never go back to where we were 3 months ago. We will never trust the Americans in the same way that we did.
It is a betrayal of a deep and abiding friendship.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says there's no way around it. Alberta has what the U.S. needs, oil.
So until our U.S. friends come back to reality, we will focus on efforts and financial means to export one of the largest oil and gas deposits in the world elsewhere.
Alberta and Saskatchewan are the latest provinces to announce countermeasures. They're planning to take American booze off of store shelves and prioritize Canadian companies for government contracts. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Ah, that's a lovely look at the Northwest Arm, the dingle in the background. Going to be some rain coming soon.
I hear that, yeah, Ryan says.
Yep, well, he'll have his full forecast coming up after the break, and we'll see you in just a few minutes.
Oh yeah, we got some weather to talk about.
Yeah.
Wet and windy conditions on the way.
Yeah, well, on the upside, though, warmer.
Warmer for sure. And, you know, still ice lingering from a few weeks ago, right? I know I've got some around my property.
Me too.
So that will likely be melting away. But make sure, again, that the water has an exit route if at all possible, because it's going to be quite a bit of rain coming down, especially through the Tri-County area. Not as much as our last shot, though. Have a look at our current temperatures, and you can see we are bumping up 7 in Shelburne, 4 in Halifax, 0 still at the Caribou Point Station there at Pictou County, 1 at Cheticamp, 0 at Ingonish Beach. So you can see those colder temps hanging on in the north and east for now. Those temperatures will bump up. Most of us, we're going to be basically rising or steady in that 5 to 7 degree range overnight tonight, as those southwest winds will be ushering in that that warmer air rather. You can see winds gusting upwards of 40 right now in through Yarmouth along this warm frontal boundary. Still seeing some mixed precipitation, some wet snow, perhaps a little bit of patchy freezing rain in through Cape Breton and across that Northumberland shore where those temps are still hovering near freezing. We've changed to showers for a good portion of us, though. As we move out and look at the bigger picture, this is the rain that is going to be working its way into the province. And on the backside of the system, that cooler air spilling down and into the U.S. South, although moderating somewhat. But yeah, some flurries as far south as southern Illinois this evening. St. Louis just at 1, Nashville at 5, Atlanta at 11. So pretty cool for this time of year. This is a pretty good spring storm as far as those folks are concerned. You can see 4 degrees in through Alberta, 10 in Vancouver, and temperatures near -1 in Winnipeg. As we look at the outlook for us moving forward, you can see this front will extend northward, that lingering messy mix for Cape Breton, northern Cape Breton, as could linger even into just around midnight. Showers, fog patches, drizzle. This is going to be the name of the game for most of Thursday morning as we hit the roads. So fog patches are really going to be the biggest issue for travel early on. And then we will be watching that rain marching in from west to east through the Tri-County area, Western Valley, and then pushing in through central areas into the afternoon. It looks like Cape Breton and eastern parts of the mainland, this will continue to be just showers. Some steadier periods of rain, though, approaching through central by late afternoon, but the heaviest rain tomorrow will be indeed in through the west. This is where temperatures all across the board, in fact, are going to be 8 to 12 degrees, so quite mild indeed. Those winds gusting 50 to 60 kilometers per hour. And it does look like some of the strongest gusts will also be in that Tri-County area. As you can see there, those gusts towards 60 even by Thursday morning. Some gusts widespread 40 to 50 elsewhere in the morning, and then gusting 50 to 60 throughout the afternoon. Could see some coastal gusts to 70 here and along the Northumberland shore and into Cape Breton. And yeah, we actually could see gusts approaching the 90 to 100 kilometer per hour range in through Les Wet winds. Now, rainfall outlooks, as I mentioned earlier, 10 to 30 millimeters looks like on par for most of the province. Likely closer to 10 through the north and east, closer to 20 to 30 for a good chunk of the region. And the best chances of exceeding 25 to 30 millimeters, maybe as much as 40 millimeters, or even a little bit more, will be here Yarmouth towards Digby County. Could see some pockets that do exceed 30 millimeters, though, even in central areas, but likely to be more limited. But Environment Canada has issued a rainfall warning here, and then, of course, up into New Brunswick, where it looks like very heavy rainfall. Excuse me. We could get up closer to 100 millimeters locally. Some very heavy rain there. Now, Friday, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 degrees even in a few spots Friday morning. Note Yarmouth already at 3. These are your morning temperatures because those temps will be falling throughout the day as this colder air gets ushered in. So rain early on in Cape Breton, tapering to showers and then flurries, and could see some accumulating snow Friday afternoon into Friday evening. Likely limited to, about 5 centimeters, but at least at the current view, but we'll take a closer look at that. Either way, Friday afternoon commute could be a little bit slick and then chilly but bright for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All good to know. Okay, thanks so much, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Coming up, trade war, how Nova Scotia's construction industry will feel the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs. Among the sectors that will feel the pinch of a trade war is the construction industry. It says expect the price of new construction to increase in this province as a result. Duncan Williams is with the Construction Association of Nova Scotia, where they're, of course, watching the tariff talk very closely. Mr. Williams, how much do you know about how tariffs will hurt construction in this province?
Well, Tom, thanks for the question. Thanks for having us. We really see, two edges of this sword. Number one is the impact that it will have on our exporters and members that we have that are building in the U.S. and exporting prefabricated materials. That is certainly a smaller piece, but nonetheless still very, very important part of our economy. The other part is the countermeasures from the federal level and what is actually going to be subjected to tariffs from the Canadian side, which will, of course, impact the price of goods and materials used in construction in Nova Scotia and across the country.
Okay, I want to ask you more about that in just a moment, but perhaps you could ballpark this, but how much of a commercial building, or a house for that matter, built in Nova Scotia actually comes from the United States?
We're still trying to figure out exactly what that composition looks like. As you can imagine, every project is different. But we would estimate that between 40 and 60% of materials used are imported from elsewhere around the globe. And a big portion of that is coming from the U.S., probably in the neighborhood of 40 to 50%.
And so how much can contractors eat that, or how much of that gets passed along to consumers in terms of building prices or housing prices?
Yeah, I'd love to say that, contractors can eat those costs, but it's just not realistic. Most contractors deal with very, very small margins as it is. So unfortunately, most of this cost will have a direct impact on the buyer of construction, whether it's the renter or the retail outlet or a commercial property or infrastructure for that matter. Those are going to be costs that are going to be directly passed on to the end buyer of construction.
There's so much uncertainty, some would say chaos. I'm wondering what impact all of that has on construction projects that may be waiting in the wings, developers or contractors who were trying to decide whether to take on that next project or not.
Yeah, I think chaos was probably a kind word for it. Madness is probably closer to what the reality is. We don't have any predictability. And of course, the current administration of the U.S. Is changing its requirements and terms on a day-to-day basis, and frankly, probably on an hour-by-hour basis right now. So just as we think we're starting to turn a corner and reach, some conclusion, the rules of the game continue to change. And that's, a direct result of President Trump.
I know you're not strictly in the lumber business, but if there's less lumber going to the United States, for example, does that mean that some of the prices, for example, lumber, that go into the construction price of a building, will they actually come down in this country rather?
I doubt it. Generally, if you're into the commercial lumber production, it's a numbers game, and that means it's volume, right? So if one of your major customers decides that they are not going to purchase, or they're going to change the rules of engagement, the industries are going to adapt as fast as they can. But ultimately, if your actual product is dependent upon and your volume goes down, you still have to cover your overhead costs. Even with some belt tightening, you're probably not going to see prices come down. In fact, I would still say they would likely go up again.
In fact, some lumber mills are suggesting they might even shut down for a short period of time if it gets really bad. So there's that as well, I suppose. You had mentioned the retaliatory tariffs by Canada as a possible approach by government. How concerning is that for your industry?
That, from a contractor point of view, builder point of view, that's probably the most intrusive when it comes to the industry being able to respond to housing needs, multi-residential housing, commercial, industrial. Those prices on products that are coming into the country increasing by 25%. You're going to see second guessing of budgets. You're going to see projects delayed. You will see projects canceled because they simply are going to be priced at a point where the market just can't bear them. Or, a provincial budget in some cases may be just completely put out of whack with what would be normal. And it's no longer affordable to do 5 projects, and maybe it's now affordable to do 3. So there will be a very real and direct impact, and it will be pretty quick. And probably long lasting. And, it's because we have such an integrated approach, and a lot of our trade is north-south. So one of the big factors for us is how do we move along the conversation to reducing barriers from interprovincial trade, maximizing the opportunities for Canadian companies to provide domestic supply. So it's a scramble right now to really try and understand who has capacity and how quickly can we mobilize them to respond. In addition to that, how do we identify other suppliers and other marketplaces for our goods, and likewise where we can import them from?
Yeah, it's a complicated picture, to say the least. Thank you so much for your time on this. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, Tom.
Coming up, bracing for hard times ahead. The U.S. tariffs put Canadian businesses and workers on edge.
Welcome back. Another day, another change in the U.S. tariff policy from the White House.
U.S. President Donald Trump has decided to grant one industry a short reprieve from the 25% tariffs he imposed on Canada. Megan Fitzpatrick reports.
Just one day after forging ahead with tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports, President Donald Trump hit the pause button on the auto sector. Now, vehicles subject to the existing trade deal between Canada, the U.S. and Mexico will be given an exemption, but just for a month.
Reciprocal tariffs will still go into effect on April 2nd. But at the request of the companies associated with USMCA, the president is giving them an exemption for 1 month so they are not at an economic disadvantage.
The reversal came after Trump spoke to the CEOs of the big three automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, and after stocks plummeted Tuesday, including in the auto sector. They bounced back up today in the wake of the exemption news. The reprieve gives the closely integrated North American industry some breathing room to figure out next steps. The companies had hoped for an exemption from the outset, and when they didn't get it, they were bracing for a huge impact. Some in the industry warned plants could shut down within days and that cars and trucks would shoot up in price for customers. Trump made it clear to the automakers that if they want to avoid tariffs next month, they should bring their entire production lines to U.S. soil.
He told them that they should get on it, start investing, start moving, shift production here to the United States of America, where they will pay no tariff. That's the ultimate goal.
Overhauling the auto sector and how parts flow back and forth across the borders to make a vehicle won't happen overnight, says this expert.
Nobody's going to be moving a plant in 1 month. So we need to be clear about that. I think in best case scenario, if anything's going to move, it would probably take years to do that.
Levitt said Trump is open to hearing about other possible exemptions, but in his primetime speech to Congress Tuesday night, he insisted that tariffs are going to make America rich again. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Washington.
The U.S. tariffs.
U.S. tariffs are expected to have a significant impact on the Canadian economy, with small and medium businesses bearing the brunt of the pain. Kwabena Odoro visited one Quebec company concerned about Trump's trade war.
I'm at Algonquin Moldings in Maribor, Quebec. This is a cabinet and stair making company that sees 70% of their production go to the United States. This pallet right here, it's on its way to the States. It's going to Indiana. Over here is where they put the finishing touches on the wood before they package it. And when it's packaged, it's like this, and then the forklift comes, takes it over, and puts it with the rest of them that are going to the United States. There are about 50 to 60 employees that work here, but now with the tariffs in place, there's a lot of worry and uncertainty about job security here.
We can't really know before time what's going to happen. It's all about the uncertainty, not knowing if the tariffs are going to last, how long they're going to last, and how it's going to affect our customers in the States if the orders are going to keep coming in. So it's hard to reassure everybody since nobody knows what's going to happen.
And when we talk about job losses, are the employees worried about that? Are you worried about that?
I personally am, because we're at the mercy of the decisions that are out of our hands.
The company recently made efforts to expand production because of the growing sales to the United States. They installed these $12 million AI wood filtering systems to help cut lumber more efficiently.
The plant is running since 25 years to supply the U.S. market. Did the plant would run next week? I don't have the answer.
And when we talk about counter tariffs, do those affect you? If so, how?
Yeah, it affects us a lot. You know, all the lumber that we have to buy it either in the U.S. side and in the Canada side. So the counter tariff that Trudeau put in place, it will affect us a lot.
It's not the only Canadian business that's facing uncertainty now. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business says 20% of Canadian small businesses feel they won't survive prolonged tariffs from the United States. The federal and provincial governments are working on reducing the interprovincial trade barriers so businesses like this one can increase their sales within Canada. They are also looking for new markets to partner with within other countries. For staff here, they are holding out hope that all this will work and that tariff wars won't put them out of work. Kwabena Odoro, CBC News, Mirabel, Quebec.
Much of the uncertainty and fear around tariffs is because of the changing goalpost. The U.S. president has said they're needed for a number of different reasons, but according to Canadian officials, none of his justifications passed the smell test. Ellen Morrow reports.
We have to stop fentanyl. It's pouring in from China through Mexico and Canada, and they've got to stop it.
Donald Trump's tariff justifications have been all over the place.
Did you know that American banks are not allowed to do business in Canada? What they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
And when it comes to Canada, some of his arguments just don't stand up.
The excuse that he's giving for these tariffs today of fentanyl is completely bogus, completely unjustified.
Stopping fentanyl and migrants crossing into the U.S. was the first and main reason for tariffs stated by Trump.
Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in. The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive.
But comparatively, it just isn't. Look at the blue. That's how much fentanyl comes in from Mexico. The red, how much comes in from Canada. Overall, Canada makes up just 0.2% of all U.S. border fentanyl seizures. And last year, illegal migrant crossings from Canada were just a fraction, about 1.5% of those along the U.S.-Mexico border. Canada has also stepped up border enforcement since Trump first threatened tariffs.
I want to speak first directly to the American people. The legal pretext your government is using to bring in these tariffs is that Canada is apparently unwilling to help in the fight against illegal fentanyl. Well, that is totally false.
Then there's Trump's claim that American banks aren't allowed to do business in Canada.
Can you believe that?
But that, too, isn't accurate. 16 U.S.-based banks are operating in Canada, according to the country's Bankers Association, making up half of all foreign bank assets in Canada. You can see their offices on the streets of Toronto.
I heard he talked about banking again this morning in a tweet, which doesn't make any sense. American banks are alive and well and prospering in Canada.
So if Trump's claims are so easily debunked, what else is going on?
I want to cut taxes on Americans while putting tariffs on China and foreign countries to take in billions and billions of dollars.
In 2017, the first Trump administration passed sweeping tax cuts that Trump now has promised to extend.
We're bringing them down very substantially, even from the original Trump tax cuts.
The plan is set to cost a staggering $4.5 trillion. So tariffs, Trump's own advisors say, could come in handy.
President Trump has a great new tax cut, the largest in history, and tariffs can easily pay for that.
Whether that's true or false, it fits with Trump's own love of tariffs.
I think they're beautiful. It's going to make us rich. Tariff, I love tariff.
But it's a harder argument to make when it comes to justifying them on a close ally. To impose the tariffs, Trump is invoking presidential emergency powers, bypassing Congress. And key to that, his insistence that the flow of fentanyl from Canada poses a national security risk.
People are getting killed and families are being destroyed.
No matter how tiny the amount may actually be.
The U.S. has paused intelligence sharing with Ukraine. That's helped the war-torn nation fight the Russian invaders. It comes after already suspending military aid to the war-torn country. But the Trump administration says positive talks between Washington and Kyiv mean it may be only short-lived. Chris Brown reports.
When Russian drones smash into Ukraine cities, as they did overnight in Odessa, U.S. satellites and surveillance can often provide enough heads up to sound the alarm and gain life-saving time to prepare. But as part of coercing Ukraine's government into cutting a Donald Trump-led deal with Vladimir Putin, crucial intelligence sharing is now suspended.
We have taken a step back and are pausing and reviewing all aspects of this relationship.
Trump's team had already paused the transfer of weapons, all of it hobbling Ukraine's ability to defend itself from Russia's constant onslaught. In his nightly address, President Vladimir Zelensky said there had been positive movement in discussions with the Americans.
It's time to end the senseless war.
But so far, Trump's efforts to end the war in Ukraine have been one-sided. He hasn't made any public demands of Vladimir Putin.
You don't have the cards right now.
That ugly blow-up at the White House was in part triggered by Zelensky's insistence on U.S. security guarantees, which Trump refused, and there's no indication either side has budged. Britain's Keir Starmer told Parliament he's been trying to patch things up and to find a formula that satisfies both sides.
The way to ensure we have peace is to ensure there are guarantees for any deal that is in place.
Verifiable. And in a primetime address, France's Emmanuel Macron said he will bring top European military chiefs together to discuss a made-in-Europe plan for ending the war in Ukraine. The fear that Donald Trump will abandon Ukraine and leave Vladimir Putin in a position to threaten the continent has galvanized European nations like no other geopolitical event recently. And in another massive shift, Germany's government says it's preparing to change its spending rules and borrow massively to increase defense. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
An all-Canadian team of scientists have been hard at work in the Antarctic area this week, collecting ocean samples in their quest to unlock some of the mysteries of climate change. CBC News has a front row seat as they conduct their research. Susan Ormiston reports.
Every day, suit up,
Get me a little further.
load up, and don't forget any piece of equipment.
Well, I've got 5 bottles, 5 glaciers.
The scientists are headed out to the glaciers, lowered in a Navy boat turned research craft, to measure what's changing in the ocean at the bottom of the world. We're going with them. Antarctica helps regulate the global climate, but sea ice is melting to near record lows. February had abnormally warm temperatures, which over time affects everything in the ocean ecology.
We've seen a ton of penguins today. Hopefully there'll be some penguin DNA in there, some whale DNA.
Jenny Tolman is capturing DNA in water samples. But her expertise is the smallest of organisms.
Microbes are the little engines of the ocean. They're also the things that respond the most quickly to change, and the poles are a very rapidly changing place.
Collecting seawater can be tricky work. Tia Anderlini is studying trace metals, maneuvering a long pole to grab uncontaminated samples.
I was using a really long pole, basically to avoid contamination from the boat itself.
Woohoo! And sometimes things just happen.
Ooh, I dropped it.
A plastic lid slipped into the ocean. Not ideal.
Can you look over and see if there's a cap floating under the boat?
Everyone looks for it, and within minutes, the cap reappears.
Treat.
Fished out successfully with an oar. Glaciers are retreating in the Antarctic Peninsula more rapidly than before.
The time is 17:13 and the depth is 51 meters.
One way to measure what's going on is grabbing sediment from the sea floor. Jeremy Bentley lets down a large claw to the depths and then hand over hand hauls it back up to deliver a muddy mass. There are clues here, and with deeper cores, about glacial history.
We're looking at changes over time.
Including human imprint, like any evidence of microplastics.
It's like a Christmas day for me with a good sediment sample.
A good bit of mud.
Yes.
Most of the samples will go back to Canada to analyze and share. There's more ambition than time. It's so rare to get here. The challenge is worth it.
It's a great day for samples from glaciers from here.
1, 2, 3.
You got everybody? Day's end, it's back to the mothership with a bit of Antarctic scientific treasure to advance our understanding of what's happening to our climate. Susan Ormiston, CBC News in Admiralty Bay, Antarctica.
It is already quite rare to catch a shooting star on camera, but imagine setting up a meteor observation network to study these cosmic fireballs and getting lucky. That's what happened for the staff at the Montreal Planetarium on Sunday. Gloria Enriquez finds out what comes next.
That's the best gift you can have. Hi, I'm Maureen Egal. I'm an astrophysicist and science advisor at the Planetarium of Montreal, and I'm a member of the Dome Camera Network. And today we're going to talk about a very special event that occurred 2 nights ago, because we had our first ever well-detected meteorite fall over Quebec. We have these professional camera networks that are dedicated to meteor observations. And now we're at the step where we have found a trace of this very bright fireball that appeared in the sky of Quebec 2 nights ago. We know a meteorite has fallen near to Drummondville, and so we're really intending to find it. When I found out that this happened, to be honest, I was skiing and enjoying my Sunday, and I just stopped everything to download the data and investigated what happened, because time is of the essence, and for us it's really important to find it as soon as possible, so we have a sample which is not contaminated by the Earth's environment. So as scientists, we're extremely excited when a meteorite fall happens, because when we receive a meteorite, we literally have a piece of the solar system that just falls into our laps. Meteorites are kind of like jewelries from space. They really hold so much knowledge about where we come from, how planets form, how the solar system evolved. We only had 2 events since 2018 that raised our interest, that we wanted to analyze. And this one is really the first one for which we have possible chances of finding a meteorite on the ground. So it's a rare event. If you can take a few minutes to look around you and just try to spot a tiny black rock of more or less this size. This is our estimate of the final mass for the Quebec fall, between 30 grams and 90 grams. This is super exciting. Please contact us, send us some pictures. It's really an opportunity we don't want to miss.
Canada's main stock index rose Wednesday, led by base metals, while U.S. markets also gained after news that automakers will get a month-long tariff exemption. Here's a look at the numbers. All right, so maybe now the big hump of ice at the end of my driveway will finally disappear.
It'll be much better than salt or pickle juice or beet juice, whatever you had planned from earlier.
Yeah, that's right. Mother Nature's certainly helping us out, and this shot will be kind of over the next 48 hours. So the heaviest rain set for the later stages of Thursday night. Let's show you our amounts again. This is the rainfall outlook. No doubt New Brunswick is going to be the bullseye here, where you can see that huge pocket of red. That's not good. They haven't really had as much as we have. There's more snow to melt. And of course, with that frozen ground, that is a lot of rain. So definitely keeping an eye on that situation. Digby, Yarmouth, keeping an eye on that. Rainfall warnings there. As you can see, that's our best chance of seeing amounts exceeding 30, but could see some pockets exceeding 25 to 30 millimeters up through Halifax, Cape Breton, but a kind of a widespread 10 to 30 for most of Nova Scotia. There's the rainfall warning. And lace to wet wind warning in effect as well. Could see some gusts to 90 kilometers per hour for tomorrow night. Just a breeze there as far as lace to wet winds are concerned. So there's the timing one more time just to show you those showers that are on the way as we move through the Thursday time period with that heavier rain marching in from west to east.
All right, Ryan, thanks for that. Month of March, of course, often marks the start of the season for maple farms in Atlantic Canada.
Yes, and local producers in New Brunswick are getting ready for the sap to flow.
People are coming here, and some will be very surprised that 10, 15 minutes from the city, you're right in the wood into a sugar bush.
The first brunches of the season were served at a maple syrup farm called Chateau Scoduc. It featured maple baked beans, pancakes, and of course, maple syrup.
The maple tapping season only lasts about 6 weeks before budding trees cause the sap to turn bitter.
Small window, huh? That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.